I'm Derek Compere. I'm the chair of the Film and Media Arts program at SMU. So thank you for coming out to our event this morning. I apologize for how hard it was to find. I was just texting with somebody who couldn't find it a little bit. So I'm really glad that you're all here for this event, and I want to thank Tony and the Dallas Film Commission for organizing this, and Ryan Reed in particular for helping set up this event for us, and all the staff at the Meadow School of the Arts who helped set it up. And welcome to Roger and James. Glad to have you here.
The nice thing about doing this is that there's really not much introduction required here. But I do thank you, Derek, for the intro, but I do also want to say thank you to, where'd Andrew go? Oh, there he is, there he is. I mean, everybody keeps thanking me, but really thank Andrew. He's the one who has put all the work together to make this happen. So I think I'll start out with a few questions, and then obviously we're going to easily get questions from the audience. So then we'll just kind of open the discussion and kind of go from there. But obviously everyone is super familiar with your work and all the accolades and everything else. But I think something that people don't know about is how much you guys are really a team and everything, and what is really teamwork to put everything together. And so if you could just tell us a little bit about James and Roger, what it's like really as you guys as a team making this happen, and not solely Roger, even though you're the name that is getting the awards and things like that. That's what I think I'd like to start with.
Carry on. She's the power.
No, it's, filmmaking's tough, and so it's so much easier if you have a partner with you. And when we go into prep, we work together, and I know what he's thinking lighting-wise and shot-wise, so he can be focusing on the things that he wants to focus on, and then I can take those meetings, and I deal with the visual effects a lot, because oftentimes visual effects wants to shoot something against a blue screen, but Roger does not. And because I'm fairly technical, I can talk to them about what is
Very
it that
technical.
Well, thank you. I can talk to them about what it is that they're trying to do, and then offer alternatives and come up with something that everybody's happy with. And I also deal with production and why we need certain pieces of equipment, and with the crew guys what they need, and make sure they're happy. And then when we're on set, it just means that Roger can be at the camera focusing on the scene today while I'm thinking about the scenes coming up. Or I'm also with the DIT watching the monitor to make kind of like another set of eyes for Roger. And then afterwards, I'm also doing, the workflow, and going to the lab and seeing it every day, and making sure that we know what we're protecting for. Because if we're going to do, for instance, IMAX, we need to protect a little wider and things like that. And then afterwards, we follow it all the way through to the DI. So I'm keeping track with the visual effects. Are all these effects done? Are they going back? We're still working on them, so we don't have to worry about them. That kind of thing. Would that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we met on a film. James was doing script, and I was shooting, obviously. And we got together after that. And we just have the same sort of approach to our work and the love of filmmaking, that kind of lifestyle. So as things progressed, James started working with me. She knew most of the crew that I had sort of attracted a crew when I started working in America. And James knew most of them longer than I did, because she's from New York and she worked in a lab. So it just evolved, didn't it? And it became, as really, I suppose, as the industry, the technology of cameras and everything got more complicated, strangely, with digital in particular, it was more important that we work together, didn't it?
But I do have to say that we are the most boring couple ever, especially when we're shooting, because we'll go home and we'll say, okay, we're going to be personal now, we're not going to talk about work. But didn't you think that close-up could have been a little bit more to the right? I mean, we are so boring.
Yeah, it's true. You'll find it.
But I think the important message is that on-set romances do work, is what you're trying to get across, right?
Well, we didn't really date until after we'd met. So,
because it works if it's not actually on the set.
Of course.
Because in the beginning, if you've ever worked a set where two people met and they were going out and then they broke up during the production, it's pretty bad. Not good.
So when you're first starting out, no.
Or wait till after.
Right, wait till after. Well, we obviously, we're at SMU Film School, and so we have a lot of students, and so I think an appropriate question would be kind of, how do they get from where they're at now to where they want to be? Not necessarily, where you are. Not everybody's going to be, Oscar winners and, making, such spectacular films. Sometimes people are just happy to have a career in the industry. So maybe just a little bit of something about how to sustain a career, really.
Well, I was just happy when I started shooting documentaries. I never thought I'd get any. I didn't think my world would change. Other than that, that's what I kind of thought I'd do. I didn't even thought I'd do that as a kid, because I loved movies since I was very young. I remember my dad had a 9mm projector, and in these days, this is a while ago, you could rent cartoons that are on 9mm film reels, and you could rent them from the local post office. And Dad would show this in the sort of attic of our little house, and it was a treat to watch. It would be Mickey Mouse or Felix the Cat cartoons, from the 50s. It was great. So I've always loved movies, but I never connected it with my life, a way of earning a living, let alone a lifestyle. It was just a lot of luck, really.
I think it's also figuring out what it is that you really love, because the business is tough, so you better love what you're doing. And when you're starting out, actually start doing it, which could be that people that from film school are doing some spec film or something like that, and do it for free and practice and get good at it. And then don't buy into, can I say bullshit?
I think this is a safe space enough to say bullshit.
That sometimes the film business brings, which is hierarchical and, I'm not good enough unless I'm at this level. Don't let go of that and remember why you're doing it, because you care about it. And, don't give up, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, but it's also so much about the lifestyle of working in the industry. Sometimes you need to take the opportunities when they come along, even though they might not seem like the greatest chance or something, or they might disrupt your kind of personal life. I mean, I went off shooting documentaries for months at a time, once like 9 months, 10 months away. It's not easy on your personal life, but that's if your commitment to what you feel is you. If you found your place, which I had found, which was with a camera, then I was willing to put everything I had into that. But that didn't happen until I went to film school, and I was very lucky to go to film school. I put off going to work. I was from a small town, and my dad was a builder. He thought I would, work in the building trade, and I did summers, but I was never happy. I didn't want to stay there. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a bit of a mess. And so I went to art college. And then I just gradually discovered that I was into visuals. I was into observing things and expressing myself with images. And, I thought I'd be a painter and whatever. And then I discovered I liked taking photographs. And then a friend of mine at art college said, the National Film School's opening in the UK. And I thought, well, that's nice. That'll be another way I can put off working for a while. So I went, so I was like 25 before I touched a camera. I mean, a film camera. So there's a lot of chance and a lot of that time kind of lost, really, kind of figuring out what do I want to do with my life? What actually excites me and what gives me satisfaction? And, you know, so it can be hard, but you have to stick at it.
Yeah, I think that's a good message. A lot of it isn't necessarily, this is what I have to do right now. This is step A, step B, step C, but get some life experience. Yeah. You know, what are your life experiences that can then inform your art and what you want to do and how that progresses?
I think also another good thing that I used to do all the time is watch movies and try and figure out why I responded to something. And then I would watch them with the sound off to understand editing, to understand without the dialogue, you know, what was propelling the story. I think that helps a lot.
Well, I know there's a lot of questions, so I'm not going to talk a lot up here today. So let's just start. There was a lot of hands right away, so questions. Who has questions? All those hands a minute ago, and now, okay, over here.
So when you first look at a script, what is your first process in creating like a shot list? Like how do you envision it, and how do you go about completing that vision for an entire script?
Well, the first thing you do, if you relate to the script, the first thing is talk to the director, and not kind of like set on some kind of look or some plan. You know, you want to leave your mind open till you understand what the director's sort of take is on that script. You know.
Yeah. And then with the director, you're going through and figuring out what it is that he wants and suggesting the shots and saying, well, what if we shoot it this way? So it's not, if you came in with a script full of shot list, I don't think the director would be very happy.
No, it's not. But also, I mean, I always find it important if I've been approached about a project and I don't know the director, I kind of think it's important to understand where the director's coming from before actually taking the job. I've made mistakes where I've taken jobs and it hasn't worked with a director. You know, you have to be on the same page. You have to feel that you've got the same approach and the same love of the project, really.
And also, there are conversations with the production designer because that's going to affect where the movie's
everybody
going.
As it goes along. Yeah. I mean, I don't think you settle on a shot until you've got the actor in front of you and they've worked out the scene. I mean, you know, you can storyboard all you want, like with Joel and Ethan. I think just about every film that I worked on with them is storyboarding in pre-production. But when you get on the set, you can still rip it up if somebody's got a different idea. Strangely, with them, it's very seldom that anybody has another idea that's like on the storyboard, but it does happen, you know.
Well, storyboards are a really great tool in prep because it really makes you look at the scene and say what's important in the scene, and it's the fact that she got soup or something, so we definitely need a shot of the soup or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah. All right.
No, I think it's important with storyboards because I'm not somebody that I don't like going on a shoot and having multiple cameras and covering the scene and leaving it to the editor. I mean, I always believe in what Andrei Tarkovsky or somebody would say, the shot is the shot. There's the right shot or the right shot in your mind for that moment. And there's no reason to shoot anything else because that is the shot. So that's where I come from. But a lot of directors don't, and I can't work that way. I mean, there's a certain director who I've had numerous meetings with over the years and socially and over projects. There's no way I could work with that director because he loves multiple cameras and a different way of working. And although I'm just a cameraman, I have a way that I feel comfortable working, you know.
And I think that's really fascinating, the whole coverage thing. Like so much, you know, in making films nowadays, you're constantly beat over the head of get the coverage kind of thing. And so I know it's going to take more questions for the audience, but I think this is important for a lot to hear, is about your philosophies on coverage. Like you say, the shot is the shot. And once you've got that shot, you don't need other coverage. You don't need anything else. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Well, I suppose it's the way I started out on documentaries and then just gradually on lower budget features I've always operated. I started off working on lower budgets where you never had the option of having a second camera or a second crew, you know. And working with Joel and Ethan all those years, they're like mind, really. They don't like working with more than one camera. They don't like zoom lenses. They like the cameraman to operate. They like a small crew, you know.
Well, and it's a fine line, though, because the film goes through many stages. If it's a good film in prep, you learn more and it sort of changes a little. Then you shoot and you go, oh, well, with this actor, maybe this is a more angry scene or whatever. And then in cutting, it also develops its own thing. So you need to give enough so there's a bit of flexibility. But you sometimes nowadays, the demand for more coverage is because that way the studio can get in and the studio can cut it their way. So if the director's really strong and knows what he wants and can feel the scene as it's playing out in front of him, for instance, in Sicario.
Yeah, Denis.
Yeah, with Denis.
Yeah, there's a sequence when they come back from Mexico with the prisoner, and the scene ends.
The first shot we took, right?
The cars come in. The scene ends with Josh and Emily talking in a wide shot, a very wide shot,
very
little
high,
figures.
Wide, yeah.
I don't think it's that
Well,
high,
okay,
but anyway,
right.
yeah.
It was a little high.
You know, you think, well, you think, well, yeah, you're going to go in and cover that with closer
Well,
for the
because
dialogue.
that was also the plan.
Yeah, it was the plan, and what we talked about. And I said to Denny, who should we start on, sort of thing. And he said, no, I don't think we do that. I think if I do that, I'll be tempted to use it, and I want to stay on that shot.
Yeah.
So he had the confidence to
yeah.
know that was going to work. And a number of people over the years have mentioned that particular scene and the strength of it and the way it's played at a distance on this conversation.
But again, that was Denis knowing cutting. I think it's really important to know, I mean, and you know cutting. It's just important to know how you can cut something and make it even stronger.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think for a lot of filmmakers starting out too, coverage helps you hide mistakes. Mm-hmm. If you made a mistake in something, so I don't think they're saying, and when you're starting out, don't get coverage.
Well, I don't know, but then you got the other extreme is 1917 when there's not a single piece of coverage.
Yeah, but we weren't just starting out.
No. Touche. No, I mean, no, but I mean, it's what's ever right for the film. Yeah. I mean, I've also done films where, like Jarhead, for instance, we'd shoot the scene in a different way, like multiple times. But I was operating like handheld, and I was just following the actors and the action. And then after each take, I'll go with Sam, and we'd talk about it and say, well, what if you start on this angle next? And then come round on this person, and they do whatever. And then sometimes I would talk to the actors while I was shooting it handheld and walking along with Jake or something. I said, well, can you just slow down a bit? I'm going to come round your back, and then I'm going to look at, and every film has a different way of work. You work in a slightly different way,
So there's another example of, we looked at the script that seemed really interesting, very, very strange and dark and wacky, and if pulled off would be incredible and really makes a statement and very funny. So great, we thought the script was great, so we met with the director and we talked about a number of things, and I did ask him, I said, so to make this work, we're going to have to really know what the shots are, right? To know that we're going to hard cut between this and that. He said, yeah. And then I just want to shoot a whole lot of stuff so I can figure it out in the editing room. We did not do that movie.
I mean, it's fine. I mean, that's their approach.
His way,
it's fine, but it's not something that we particularly enjoy.
Yeah. And side note on Sicario, it's playing tonight at the Texas Theater if anyone wants to see the shot they were talking about on a big screen.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So let's... And Julio Cedillo, who is in that film, will do an intro to Sicario tonight at Texas. So little plug for that this evening.
Hi. So let's say you are working on a film and the director says, okay, I want to shoot it in the style and essence of Rio Bravo. Do you get your crew together and you go watch Rio Bravo? Would you gather them and go their span of movies to kind of gather the essence of what you're going to try to produce?
No. It's never happened. I mean, sometimes a director has said, before I shot The Man Who Wasn't There with Joel and Ethan, they mentioned a Hitchcock film, but it wasn't for the photography, it was for the setting and the feel of small town California. I don't remember a director ever saying, I want it to look like such and such. And I think if a director said that, I would be really kind of upset. I went to an interview once where the director said, I want this film to look like Shawshank Redemption. And I said, why? It's not Shawshank Redemption. He said, no, I just want it to look like Shawshank. I said, I didn't do the film. I don't want to do something that looks like something else. I want to shoot a film that looks like the film itself. I mean, otherwise it's not fun. I couldn't copy that. When Denny approached us about working on Blade Runner, it was like, do you want it to look like the original? I can't shoot like Jordan Cronenworth. I don't want to. I couldn't. The harder, I just no way I could. So no, but we said no, and Denny said no. It's going to be a film to itself. It just has. It's a follow-on, but it's a film that should stand by itself and has the visuals it finds.
But at the same time, sometimes there are movies that the feel of, we'll talk about, the feel of this movie or that movie.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like Shadow of Doubt was a Hitchcock film. I was thinking about Joseph Cotton, but it was the feel of it. It wasn't that, it's lit in a certain way. I think that would be just too restrictive,
Yeah, you were talking about more an era of an essence, an essence of the 1960s Westerns with John Wayne. You want something that reflects that sensibility as opposed to the film itself.
I always think it's funny when people are doing a film and they say, well, we're doing a Western and we want it to look like that. Well, that whatever film, the searches or whatever, looked like it did because of certain technology, certain limitations, certain approach, certain cultural mores that created that kind of film. Why would you do it now? I always find it funny when somebody says, well, we're doing a period film, so it should be sepia. But people's eyes weren't different in 1500 or whenever than they are now. I mean, why should the thing be sepia? If you're going to do that, if you're going to go that far, it's got to be for a better, deeper reason than just I'm trying to reflect something that's old. I think that's kind of ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Great. Over here.
So I do DP work as well. The thing that I mean, most difficult is insert shot. Because I always need to issue, the insert shot would kind of be that. It's not going to be, very practical when it comes to editing. And I feel like a lot of student films also have this issue about, insert shot is not interesting. So, how would you, make the insert shot very interesting? Because I've been thinking about this question for a long time and I couldn't figure out.
Is there something in particular you're shooting or you've shot? There's a shot, it's I got to get a shot of this apple or something like that.
Yeah, that means insert.
No, I know, but I mean, do you have a specific example or just in general?
Yeah, apple or somebody's drinking soup, the soup is very important. Then how would you get a shot of
You know how to make all the shots cohesive?
something like that? Yeah.
Kind of has to fit within the scene. So if the apple's not important to the scene, it becomes just an insert. But if the fact is they're putting poison in the apple, or the apple is what's going to kill the person later, an insert of that can be sort of a forewarning or something, so it has a purpose.
I always remember talking to Conrad Hall. You know who Conrad Hall is? One of the greatest cinematographers ever, American cinematographers. And he said, just because it's an in-shot shot, people say, well, the second camera can pick that up while we move on. He said, but it's still on a 40-foot screen. It still stays there for the amount of time that maybe an actor's face does. It's as important as any other element of the film, and it should be treated as important as any other element of the. And yeah, I kind of think I look at sort of. I go, Andrei Tarkovsky, again, look at his films when he does an insert. Wow, that really means something, you know.
Yeah, there kind of has to be a reason to go to that object or person or whatever finger. And then it can be very powerful and very helpful in editing, actually. But
Does that answer your question a little bit?
no.
Like for No Country for Old Men, you know, like he split the corn
Mhm.
in front of the how do you say
Yeah, the clerk.
Yes.
Yeah.
that? So how do you like design that shot? Like how do you know like this is the right moment for me to capture that shot in that way?
Well, I mean, that was sort of storyboarded that way, and that's just in the discussions with a director, and yeah, I mean,
Well, it's
I
also
don't know.
the coin itself is going to determine the fate of the guy, so it heightens the tension.
The significance of it, yeah. I mean, I think the best insert in No Country for Old Men is the I don't know if it's a peanut packet or it's a sweet packet or something in the garage, and it's just going uncrunching, and it's just the sound and the time it takes, and it's kind of an inconsequential insert, but I mean, it means so much, doesn't
Well,
it?
it develops tension too,
Yeah.
because sometimes when it's inconsequential, we're having trouble with that word, it unsettles you because why am I looking at this? And so that's a good use of an insert. And sometimes it's taking you away from action that you kind of want to know what's going on, which is also creates an emotion. So, I mean, inserts can be quite powerful. It's the inserts where they're just using it to bridge a continuity era that don't work.
Okay, good. Maybe, think a little bit of like the old Hitchcock adage, you put the bomb under the chair and you show the bomb under the chair, then the conversation between two people that don't know the bomb's under the chair all of a sudden becomes more impactful, basically. And that's why that insert shot is there.
You do know insert shots.
It's not my job to answer these questions. I'm just the guy with the microphone today.
You can raise your hand first. You got it.
I just want to say I love 1917. It's one of my favorite films of all time. And for a film like that that is so driven by the cinematography and you can't use the edit to kind of, I guess, not hide your mistakes, but kind of.
Roger doesn't make mistakes.
So for a film like that, what is your process in terms of like what do we see and how do we use the camera to kind of show the whole world of that?
Well, it's the same as if you were doing it in cuts. You still kind of figure. And when we started talking about it, Sam was saying, well, don't think about technology. Don't think about how we're going to do it. Just think about where should we put the camera and the audience, in respect to what's happening in the story, how it's developing. Where do we want to be wide?
Two-shot and
Yeah,
a
where do we
single.
want to close in? Where do we want to go off one character and follow another character and then come back? How do we want to, how do we want that shot to develop? So but that is the same as if you were shooting it in cuts. It's no different. It's just then you've got to string all those cuts together and not have them. So then it becomes a technological challenge rather than a creative challenge. I think that was the trick about that film, because obviously that sounds simple. Okay, I want to be wide on this moment and then close on this moment. Well, you have to join it together in some way, in such a way that it feels of a piece with the story rather than being a device. And I think there's some films that have used the idea of a continuous shot, but you felt, well, why am I watching somebody go from A to B, which is taking like 4 minutes, when you could cut? And you know what I mean? And that I think was the trick which we were really most worried about. We were both worried it being a gimmick, and actually said as much to Sam, is this a gimmick? but once we started playing around and drawing, we storyboarded the whole thing. We felt that it did feel right, that we weren't going to take the audience out of it by having some just go from A to B,
Basically, we were cutting it ahead of time. We were saying, we'll be a single here, we'll have a double. Because it's also, we were following them through a trench, which could get really boring, just being behind them or being in front of them. So it really was important to think of it as a normal film first, and then, decide where you want it to be, and then give it to us and say, so you guys figure out how to shoot it.
Which is basically what happened. Sam said, after that, I said, well, how are we going to do it? He said, well, that's up to you.
Is there something that you had to learn the hard way in the industry that you wish you had learned in film school?
So much of the job really is about the politics on some of the larger films. Even smaller ones really. It's about politics and about relationships, and I've never been very good at that.
I think one of the first things that I learned was I was coming from commercials into features, and somebody told me you can tell who's a feature creature and who's coming from commercials, because if there's a disagreement, the commercial person will have it out and will get into that. The feature creature knows they're going to live with this person for 3 months, so they wait and they try and make it work out. And I've always remembered that because it's true, that just always remember you're going to be with these people for 3 or 4 months, and you should hold off if you can, and then get them at the wrap party.
Merced, yeah.
So I believe I once heard Billy Wilder say that he preps for every movie the same way. He prepares, and then he throws it out the second he gets to set. And I'm just curious if you could speak to that from a cinematographer's perspective, because I'm a director myself, and I have a plan, I have a shot list, but the minute I get to set and I see the light hitting the actor's face, they start to say the words, you start to block it out, and you think, oh no, this is not at all what I had in mind. And then I work with my cinematographer to figure it out and adjust that plan. I think for me, leaving room and space for magic is super important, and I'm just curious if you can speak to that and how you as a cinematographer leave space for magic and finding new things on set.
It's a great way of going about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the trick, really, not to get tied into to prep. I've done films like right across the board where, with Alex Cox on Sid and Nancy, I think Alex is going to be in town soon, where whatever we talked about went out the window because everything became like shooting a documentary. So I started doing it handheld after a few days. We used a dolly and stuff, and I thought, no, this isn't going to work. And to the other extreme, which is working with M. Night Shyamalan on The Village, and I spent 5 weeks maybe with him, storyboarding with him the whole film, thinking that would be a basis for what we did. And then finding when the actors came and the actors had an idea, and maybe M. Night wasn't on set, and we would work out the scene, I would work out the scene with the actors, and we would sort of come up with a different piece of coverage. And M. Night would come back and said, no, they got to be standing like this, and that's not what's on the storyboard. So you shot exactly what was on the storyboard, which I thought was very restrictive. I mean, I don't think it's a bad film, actually, but I think it could have been a better film if it was allowed a little bit more space, really. I think the trick is that, well, Billy Wilder's saying about prep is to get to know the material, get what James said earlier. What's the essence? What's the important moment for this in this story? And then you always have that in your head. So even when you see the light and the actor doing something different, it's still in your head. Why did you take this project? Why did you write it? If you wrote it, what are you trying to get out of it? I don't think you're ever going to break that, because that's why you're there.
Yeah, but I think it's really important to see the magic, as you said, on the set, because that makes a better movie, I think, because there's no way that you know what happens when the actor is actually there and says the line in a different way than you had in your head, and you go, wow, I never thought of that, and you have to go with it, and it makes a much better movie. So I think you're on the right track.
I find a lot, that you actually overthink in prep, and sometimes when the actor gets there, and you think, my God, okay, I'm just going to shoot a mid shot and we don't need anything else. No, I'm serious. I used to do music videos a lot, and if the band was no good, you used to move the camera as much as possible. But if it was Eric Clapton or something, no. B.B. King, no. You just hold the shot.
It's and also Benicio on Sicario, he kept going up to Denis, and you never hear an actor saying this, going, all these lines on the page, I don't really need to say them. I can do it on my face, or you could give them to Josh.
Give the lines to Josh, yeah. And he did,
Thank you.
Let me hit this section. Anybody in the section? Oh, there we go, right there.
So as creatives, I'm sure a lot of us look at our lives through like camera lenses or as a movie. So how do you use the world around you to expand your creativity?
By noticing things, right?
Yeah, I think we were talking about earlier, I think life experience, if you don't have life experience, what are you putting into your work? I was very lucky getting into documentaries and actually experiencing parts of the world that I've never got to see, places and people I would have never experienced any other way. So I think that's really important. But I think we both, working on films is a lifestyle, and it's also an experience of life, and it's not just the joy of making the film, it's the joy of actually meeting and experiencing people, like when we went to Morocco with Marty on Kundun. It was, I think, one of the greatest experiences of our lives because of the people we met, not necessarily about the film process, but just the people that we met and the experience of that part of the world and that life,
And I think life can get so crazy sometimes. You could definitely, and I definitely am guilty of this, you can race through life without looking at anything. But you just need to take the time and maybe look across the street and see the way the trees in front of the house and go, well, wow, I like that look. Why is it? And sort of that's gathering this library of images in your head that you can use at another time.
Yeah, it's also nice working on films as well and actually exploring, like with the Tibetans, exploring that culture and that history and even like a film like Sicario, which is not quite contemporary, but it was pretty interesting exploring the period that it was set in and what was happening at the border at that time. Pretty horrendous, but you're kind of, you're living life at the same time as you're working on a movie, aren't you?
Well, and so I think that kind of plays in a little bit to your book, Byways. So, you like that segue? Is that good? So Byways, which we had the book signing last night at the, I feel like a shill for the Texas Theater today, at the Texas Theater last night. That book in particular, you took a lot of those photographs while you were, working on a project somewhere, but in your downtime or between things, just things that you noticed and pictures that you wanted to take. And it's a little bit of an example of just stopping to take a look at life around you and not be so focused on what you're doing, and then maybe, applying that to your life a little later.
Yeah, but I don't directly connect them to film world at all. They're much more kind of my personal little
but they're
quirky
an image.
visions.
Your life experience.
My life experience, actually, that's a different side of me maybe, but I find that really important. I don't take many photographs, but I love that time where I try and I just go around, like tomorrow I'll probably walk around the city just looking. And maybe I'll take one photograph, maybe not, I don't know. But I just love exploring and things.
And also when you do that during a film, it takes your mind off of the film. It keeps that visual muscle moving, but you're not thinking about the film and how you're going to light it and how blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's true. If I've had a bad day on the shoot and I haven't been completely happy with what I've done, and I go out and take a photograph at the end of the day, I go, oh, well, I'm okay now.
What is the process that you go through when deciding on what camera and lens package you're going to use for a specific project? And if you have maybe like a favorite camera and lens that you kind of go to from time to time?
Not really. I mean, I'm not really into technology that much. I mean, I've always used the lenses that I felt the sharpest, the cleanest, less elation, the lightest, the easiest for my assistant to focus pull on. They're basically the same with the cameras. I just pick a camera that's, sits on my shoulder well. When it was, when I was starting out, like it was shot with an Arri BL, and then and since it's been shooting digitally, I've just liked the Alexa, so we've just stuck with the Alexa.
Yeah.
I mean, now and again I'll sort of test other cameras and other lenses, but I'm a bit sort of stick to what I know,
Well, with the Alexa too, we like the color space, the work that they did on the color space, and there is a difference. So once the Alexa came out, we went, oh, okay, we can go into digital now. But we are trying to shoot it the way we want it to end up. In other words, we're not saying, oh, later we're going to add this and that. It's kind of from the old days of film. You had to make it look the way you wanted it to look because you couldn't change it later.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like bells and whistles, so I'm like a real simple camera. I mean, like now I shoot with a digital Leica I got in my bag, which is just like, mechanical kind of thing. It's not even through the lens viewfinder, which is sometimes frustrating, but I like the simplicity, and that's how I work on film as well. I mean, that's why I operate. That's why my lighting's really simple. Yeah.
Great. This question's a bit more lighthearted.
Good.
On set, I'm curious, as such accomplished creatives, what's like your on-set pet peeve? So like personally, I've in the past year started doing filmmaking, mostly boom operating, and mine is when mid-scene there's a car honk.
Screaming ADs, hate that.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, the ADs were very, very loud. They were like sergeant majors.
That's
And it was
English
like,
ADs still.
Yeah, English AD. That was horrendous. I think my biggest peeve is after you've shot a shot or got a scene and you're moving on to something else. My biggest peeve is often the actors and sometimes a director and a producer might stand on the set and be chatting. And I've got the pressure of relighting for the next setup or whatever, or laying a track or whatever. And I have to try and get the AD to get them off so I can work. I kind of find that a little disrespectful. Everybody's got space. You got to give the actors the space when they're rehearsing, or the time when you're shooting. You got to judge when you can go in and tweak a light, or when you got to live with what you've done, even if you don't like it, because you'll interrupt what the actor's going to give you. And I think that's fair, but then I think you need that in return, because I think there's a lack of understanding that, the electricians have got things to do, the grips have got to do things between shots, and I think there should be respect for that. So that sort of noise on set in between the actual time when the camera runs is a bit of a peeve.
Okay.
That got serious. I thought that was light-hearted.
I didn't want to ask something like super philosophical or like work ethic related. Yeah.
Okay, then
Yes,
I guess
go ahead.
I'll bring it back to the serious moment then for a little bit. I worked as a projectionist at a movie theater for 5 years, so my entire life has been digital. And I was just curious, I'm obsessed with like that early 2000s moment in film where we switched from 35-7, whatever the case may be, into digital. So I was wondering, could you guys take me back to the headspace you guys were in the early 2000s when they told you, or maybe you guys even decided for yourself, that switch is coming and it's here to stay. It's not going to be a fluke, and we're going to spearhead it.
Well, some people wouldn't say it's here to stay yet. I mean, some people are still shooting film. I mean, I would shoot film if a director particularly wanted to shoot film, but well, that transition. I mean, it was actually quite slow coming. I mean, there was
there was the other one, the first cameras that tethered you, to the big monitor in the back, and so it was kind of cumbersome. But I will say that when we saw the Alexa and we decided to do In Time with the Alexa, everybody started getting interested in the Alexa. And I went to the academy. You weren't with me that night. And I found myself with a circle of DPs around me going, what's he shooting at? What's the speed? Why is he doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And everybody was really suddenly interested in digital. And I think that you helped the demise of film.
Yeah, but you kind of wait, you wait till it gets to that tipping point. Now, like, we all talk about tipping points now in context of something else, but which is a bit more serious, so I won't go there.
Stop.
No, but there was
Bring
a
'em back,
tipping
bring 'em
point
back.
where digital just offered more than you were getting with film. I felt that was my call on that. But the same thing happened in the post-production world, because I think the first film that went totally through a digital post was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And that really started a big trend. So, I mean, I think really once that happened, then the idea of digital capture was much more easily sort of accepted, or you could see what the opportunities with it were,
And also the fact that more and more movies are using more and more visual effects. So since visual effects are done digitally, to start in digital ends up generally with a better product because you're not trying to fit it in. So I think
I think it's interesting, back to the DI, because you think the rush to do DIs in post, what was it, only a few years, and everybody was finishing in DI. And now even the people that are still shooting film capture are still digitizing. Most of the releases, if they go back to a negative, even the people, the film's in an interesting place because some people go back to film and then go back digital again. So like Greg Fraser shoots Batman, transfers it onto film, transfers it back to digital, because he wants to get a look at film, which I think is great. I mean, you could do anything you want, but I think it was the DI that really changed.
Does everyone know what DI means when he says DI? Will you give a quick explanation for some?
Well, it's just a digital finish. So if you shoot an emulsion negative, then you scan that negative and you time it as a file, as a digital file.
Yeah, it's called a digital intermediate. So in the old days, there used to be an internegative or a CRI, and now there was a DI, and then it became...
Yeah, you would go back to film. I mean, like, Oh Brother went back to film after the digital timing.
Well, that's because they were still releasing in film. Nowadays,
still releasing in film,
releasing
but now
less and less in film.
And so you said that if a director wanted to shoot film, maybe you would do film. You've done digital for so long now. Mm-hmm. Would like if a director came to you and said, "I really want to shoot this on film," would you be like, "Why? What is it? That about the story and the character that requires this to be shot on film, as opposed to the ease of the process and the workflow of digital?" Would you? I mean, of course, you have a question. You would have that conversation with the director. But can you talk about a little bit? Has anyone recently or said we should shoot this next thing on film?
No, I mean, the last one we did was Hail Caesar, which, I thought could have been digital, but the guys wanted to shoot film.
Yeah, they thought it would be more of the era, but I think that you could have made it that era in, like, Ektachrome in digitally rather easily. But the problem with shooting in film nowadays is you don't have the same infrastructure. You don't have the same technical people in the labs. You certainly don't. And you don't have the same technical people in Kodak. So when we did Hail Caesar, we had a problem, and I had to figure out what the problem was, and I had to do everything else first, because Kodak would always say, no, it's the camera, it's that. But it was the emulsion, and it was the film. And they didn't have a technician that could come to me and do it. I had to do it and tell them. So you kind of feel all alone out there if you're doing film.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That experience in the industry is long gone now.
Yeah,
You know,
they've gone
people have
digital.
retired or died or
Yeah.
gone digital, and that expertise just
Yeah.
isn't there anymore to be able to
Yeah, it's
support film.
kind of sad. Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering, like, how would you recommend approaching cinematography from a student kind of low budget filmmaking perspective? Because a lot of times, as a director and DP, I find myself with a really cool shot idea, but it's I know there's no logistical kind of money way I can make this happen, and I don't like the idea of being limited as it's I don't want kind of budget kind of restrictions to limit creativity.
Could everyone hear the question? Basically, yes, everyone heard it? Don't have to repeat it? Okay, good.
Well, what we've heard so many times recently in the podcast, when we've been doing the podcasts, are people that have done quite a lot of films, but they say with limitations comes inspiration. You figure out another way to do what you want, and it turns out to be a better way instead of just throwing money at it. So don't despair.
But I think I think you have more freedom in a funny kind of way on a smaller budget film, with fewer people. You do something like a Blade Runner or something, your expectations are so high. It gets into the whole world of effects and backgrounds and not necessarily what you're doing with the camera, but the expectations and the pressure is so high. There's never enough time or money. Doesn't matter if you've got 5 million or 200 million, there's never. So I think a bit flippantly say you've got to get used to it. As soon as you pick up a camera, you're compromising in some way.
But also, when you're creating a film, you're creating a reality. So it's what you create. So you can do that by saying, okay, so this is what I want, and I don't have enough for the set. Well, let me make it, completely limited in the frame and make them guess what's over there or something like that. And it ends up being something better.
I think as James said earlier, I think restrictions lead to creativity. And sometimes you overthink things. Like there was a wonderful moment on Blade Runner when we were talking about stage space and the amount of money it would take to build the Las Vegas casino. And I said, well, why is it going to take any money? You don't need walls. We'll just black the whole place and put some atmosphere in and I'll light it. And they went, what? And, I was the cheapest set on the whole part of the movie, but it's like that came from having to be creative with the fact you didn't have enough money for that particular set.
Well, and also on Sicario, and we didn't have a lot of money, and we had to do the interior of the van, and we were trying to find a van that we could...
Oh, the swap van,
yeah.
The beginning.
And it ended up just being plywood, and with a lighting effect going through.
Yeah, I said,
you
don't need a SWAT vehicle. We don't need to cut it in half so we can get the crew inside and get the shots. I said, just make it out of plywood, because you're not going to see it. I'll just light it as though you're in a moving thing, and we put it on a turntable and I whacked a light through the window and there we were. If you studied it, it's really crude, but nobody does because they're kind of gripped by it.
Yeah, right.
What was your first job on a professional set, and how long did it take you before you got a job as a cinematographer?
I can't remember what my first job was, really. No, I left film school and I looked for work as a camera assistant, and I wasn't getting any work. So I decided I would look for work as a cinematographer, because at least I'd feel better about myself. And so I just went knocking on doors. I'm a very shy person even now, but I used to be incredibly shy and insecure. But one day I had a couple of beers probably, and I went and knocked on a door of somewhere in Wardour Street where all the little film companies were, and I was looking to get to shoot music videos. So, and I knocked on this one door, and this guy said, "Oh, okay, I'm not doing anything, but I'll look at your work." And so I put my work on his flatbed Steenberg, so he could watch the film reel I had. And he said, "Oh, I'm not doing any music videos. I'm shooting a little independent feature film in a few weeks' time." I said, "Well, let me do that." And he looked at my work a bit more seriously. He said, "Okay." It was just, I don't know if that was the first one, but that was the first film with a kind of largest crew and lighting and, ADs that screamed and the whole bit.
What about you, James, for your first?
The first movie I did was directed by a guy that used to direct porn. And you just can't take the porn out of the guy. This was a straight movie, but it really, and so it was a SAG movie, and instead of hiring actresses, everyone was a playmate. And I learned the difference between a playmate and a bunny. But the problem was that they had their shirts off in the film a lot, but I would go to take a continuity photo of something, and they were very sweet. Let me sit in, but I could never keep those Polaroids because they kept getting stolen from me. And the producer would come on set every day with these big Dixie cups of something and give it to the director and the AD and himself. And I realized I had to work with these people, and I didn't. So I was really trying really hard. So I got to the point where I got a Dixie cup, and it was either vodka or gin. I don't know what it was. I thought, oh my God, now what do I do? So I was killing all the plants on the set. So it was not a good shoot, but I still continued. It was probably one of the worst movies I've ever worked on.
But I guess the important part is you stuck with it and you continued in your career after that.
Yeah, I decided to do commercials for a while, and then I did a TV movie, which was almost as bad because there were like 15 cameras hidden, and I'd be running before the take to try and find out where the cameras were so I could indicate it on the notes, so yeah.
Can I ask what the difference between a playmate and a bunny is?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know,
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
The playmates are in the magazine, but so they're a little higher up in the echelon, and the bunnies are the ones that are in the clubs that are serving people. So if you call a playmate a bunny, it's a bad thing, I know.
Okay. I don't think the Playboy clubs exist anymore, so.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
All right, let's get this conversation back on track here. Sorry. In the corner here.
Hello. So you guys talk to a lot of incredible actors on your podcast, on Team Deakins, and I was wondering, because you talk about like the blend of the performative aspect of an actor, like how focused they are on themselves, and then their spatial awareness with like the geography of the camera. Who do you think embodies like the best mix of that you've worked with so far? And then what would be something that you don't enjoy in an actor as far as that kind of mix of personality?
Well, there's some actors that that don't want anybody to look at them, which is a little difficult, because especially if you're doing continuity, you kind of have to look at them. And then we did one, and everything stopped because he said, there are people here, and we couldn't figure out who the people were, but there was a big silk up, and there were just a bunch of boots, because they were standing behind the silk, not to get into his eye line. So
we met on a film, right, in South Dakota.
I'm talking about, yeah.
But we were filming the actor, Val Kilmer.
Oh, you're going to tell the name.
Yeah, no, Val, he's a very sweet guy, but we were filming Val right in the middle of nowhere, and he said, there's people in my eye line. And we all looked around, and it was miles away. There was a kid sitting on the back of a pickup. I mean, you could just make him out on the horizon. So the AD had to send somebody out to get these people out the way. And yeah, everybody else had to stand behind the silk, but then he saw their feet, so he had to drop the silk so you couldn't see the feet. And I think it was Bruce or somebody, my dolly gripper at the time, said, well, he does theater in New York. Does he turn
Everybody turn around.
Does the audience turn their backs to the stage? I mean, it doesn't make sense. But you have to laugh. I mean, the thing is, they all have a different process, which is fine. I mean, sometimes you're working with an actor and they don't want any contact with you at all, like nothing. They're totally into who they are, and they don't care about the crew or anything, which is a bit weird, but that's their process. And sometimes other people, like Morgan Freeman on Shawshank, would be doing these most emotive scenes where he had to cry or whatever, or in the parole board or whatever. But in between setups, he'd be telling a joke. You know, he'd maybe get before the punchline, they'd put a slate on, he'd do the shot, he'd cry, or whatever, and then the director would say cut, Frank would say cut, and then Morgan would finish the story. And you go, well, that's amazing, but everybody's so different, you know?
Well, someone like George McKay, who was in 1917, he was wonderful because he had to be aware of the camera. And usually you try and set it up so they don't have to think about the camera, because a lot of them don't like to. But I asked him, I said, is this hard for you? Because you have to be in a certain point at a certain place. He said no, that he loved it because he loved knowing the process, but that was who George was. But he also said that sometimes actors come in and they're just told, be there. Just, you have to be there and just do it. Or, he says the other extreme was the directors who said, oh, you can do whatever you want, just do it. So he liked the in-between that we were doing in 1917.
There was one actor that when we were shooting film, and my assistant was reloading the camera, and the actor said, what the effing do we need that for? Let's just do it again. You thought, wow, he's not quite on the same planet.
Or another actor where I worked with, and I came on set one day, and you know, I had a good relationship with him. I said, hey, how are you doing? And it was a movie about a serial killer, and he goes, not so good, James. I'm doing my first kill today. And it's like, okay, whatever.
Everyone's going to go hit IMDb after this and be like, who are they talking about?
So one of the scenes that gives me goosebumps just thinking about it is that Jesse James, the train scene at night, with the dolly, where the train hits the camera. How did you decide to do that versus any other option? I mean, it's just so eerie. It sets the movie. Can you just talk about that for a bit?
That was something Andrew wanted. That was something that when we were storyboarding, he said, well, let's have that. Let's connect it so we can feel the weight of the train. And then there was this whole thing of how are we going to do it? And, you know, again, it was a lot of overthinking. So I said to the key grip, can you get me some foam? And I just put the camera on a piece of foam on the flatbed that the train hit, and that was it. I said, we'll just try it, and it was fine. And they were trying all these kind of controlled, I don't know, how to keep those things apart, and so they weren't going to bash each other, but you needed it bashing each other. But no, that was one of Andrew's, you know, I must have that shot. I really like that shot. Sometimes a director has a very, very strong idea of a shot, and they stick with it all the way through. It's interesting.
Well, I think that's a great example of a practical shot as opposed to a visual effect, right? And sometimes doing the practical shot is just going to be better than, you know, spending weeks on some particular visual effect and trying to get this right and let's fix it in post, or we're not even going to do this. It's all going to be 100% digital train, digital camera, digital everything moving. I know in our conversations the last couple of days, you obviously prefer real sets, real locations, real practical effects. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, it'd take the fun out of it if you're in a blue screen room like this with blue screen or a LED screen around you and actors here. I mean, what's the point? I don't like it. But then I was brought up in a slightly different world than people have been brought up in now. I might say the first film the first large film I did was 1984, which, you know, the first big studio stage work and everything. And there's no effects work in that at all post. It's all done in camera, including, and I think it might have been one of the last shots done this way, we did a glass shot where we set the camera up in a landscape and had a piece of glass of 45 degrees, big piece of glass in front of the camera, blacked off. And then we had to paint 2 days, painting in tower blocks, and then like a big metallic kind of structure that was holding this telescreen. Then we got an arc projector. Well, I didn't, but effects a projectionist specialist got this projector, and it projected an image we'd shot to fit into where the screen was on this painting on this piece of glass with the background going. And then we got some extras to walk in the background and shot the shot. And it's all done in camera. I mean, it's like ridiculous now. Of course, you would do it all CG, but it was a lot of fun. And I think a lot of that sort of fun's gone out of it. And there's so many things you can do. As you say, like some things you can do really simply. So why the hell go to effects? Why not have the thing there for the actor? Why not have the image on the big screen so the actors can react to it instead of putting it in after? I don't get it.
Well, a lot of times on set, there's hurry, 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 and they say, okay, we'll do it in visual effects. No, it's only going to take 15 minutes. Just wait. And a lot of times they won't. Yeah. But, you know, seeing 1984 the other day when we were remastering it, it really struck me, the scene with 1,200 people in it, because you've gotten so used to seeing digi-doubles in crowd scenes. It's such a difference when it's actually real people in the frame.
And also I think sometimes when it's done in post, there's too much emphasis on what's being put in post.
Everybody's
costumed perfectly. And I noticed in one of those scenes, in the hanging sequence in 1984, you hardly see the screens. There's 2 45-foot square screens up there with an image on that's been projected with an arc projector, and it's all a huge setup, but actually we're on the actors and the characters, and then they just, you know, you see it in another scene, but for most part, it's part of the background. It's not the emphasis of the shot, because you're actually filming a story with actors, you know.
Well, I think that's a fun challenge for maybe some of you film students is what can you do practical? Think of, you know, something that you would normally do, or think you could only do earlier. You were saying, I could only do this if I had more money. Try and think of that creative way to do something with a practical effect. Maybe that's a 48-hour film challenge just thing, or an assignment for the professors in the audience. More questions over here? Go ahead.
I've got a question with pertaining to dialogue. A scene that's heavy in dialogue and pre-visualization with the edit. How you decide, like, 2 extremes might be, of styles might be something like Tree of Life, where it's just a lot of jump cuts and it's very documentary-like, versus like 12 Angry Men, where everything's extremely choreographed and lines match up and everything. The temptation that I'm having with some of the dialogue scenes I'm trying to storyboard and make shot lists for is, well, let's just have 2 cameras, you know. So let's do a ton of takes and focus on every actor, and there's an ensemble cast in this room. How do you go about planning a heavy dialogue scene with multiple actors, and on the day of the shoot, like, let's say, you know, all the prep you've done goes out the window, and you know, you come up with new ideas. How do you talk about the edit with the director? What is that? I mean, is that just constantly in the conversation of like, okay, we're going to cut from this wide to this medium shot, but then at this line, I think we're going to cut to the close-up of the other character? Or is that all?
Well, it varies very much depending on the director's way of working. I mean, you mentioned two films, 2 directors. I mean, all of Terry Malick's films have that style, that stylistic approach. And all of Sidney Lumet's films are like, he was absolutely renowned for doing 1 or 2 takes and never shooting more of a shot than he needed in the cut. And that's the way Joel and Ethan started out when I was started working with them. They would do a conversation, like a two-handed conversation. They might shoot the wide shot for the first line because they only needed the wide shot for the first line. Then they'd go into the coverage and they would only shoot one actor that they wanted to be on for a certain line. I mean, it was amazing because they'd come up without the money to do it any other way. And the last times I've worked with them, they're a little bit more free and they'll let the actors run and they'll shoot a longer shot. But it's very much the director's sort of style of approach.
Yeah, and I think thinking about whatever the scene is, and if there are two people that are interacting and they're seated together, you can get a two-shot, because that's a variety, because you don't want everything to be single or whatever, to think about that, and to know what you're covering, to know where you're using the shots is actually kind of important, because the eye lines keep changing depending on who you're coming off of. So that's really critical to get sort of thought about before you get on set, because when you get on set it gets a little crazy and it's harder to remember. But also, if you could do something that even went from one person to another person, again, that's a variety of a shot, because I would think the thing you wouldn't want to do is just have the same types of shots. You want to have some kind of, and maybe an insert. We could do an insert on that one too.
I think, but I think before all that, you've got to decide, well, what's the weight of the scene? Now, you might have thought that when you wrote it or when you did prep. You think, what is the weight of the scene? Who's the antagonist and protagonist, or whatever you want to think of it? Who is this? Which character is the focal point of this scene? Then maybe that changes during the scene. Then maybe when you see a rehearsal with the actors, maybe that changes. Maybe you realize who you thought was the central character actually doesn't have to be the central character in this. Maybe that character is more of an observer. So you shoot the other characters in a more sort of active way, and yet the main character of the film is an observer shot on a still camera at a distance. It's like that's how it all kind of like develops. I think what we said earlier, you need a kind of don't have to have, but it's kind of good, I think, to have an overall concept. When you're sitting in an office reading a script with a director and everybody else, but on the set, to be open to what those things sort of occur to you. But I think what is death, which is what James is saying, is going around and shooting everybody on a 50mm in the same size. That's death. You see it all the time, and it's boring as hell. But it's not only boring, but it's not actually telling the story in any way. It's not furthering the story by the use of the camera, and that's what filmmaking is.
And what can be fun sometimes, if the director's adventuresome enough, is when somebody has a line being behind them and maybe someone's reacting to the line, and that's like they know something the other guy doesn't know, or whatever the story is. And that's kind of fun to do, because it's also unexpected that the person that's speaking isn't face on to the camera.
But extreme, play the whole thing on an insert. Play this whole on me doing this. Play it all voiceover on an insert. Why not? You can do anything you want, but people don't have the guts to do it a lot. I feel they feel they have to be on somebody when they're talking. They're not even on the reaction. They're on the dialogue, which is...
And maybe don't tell the actor. You just, set up a camera, but shoot the hands. And then,
we do that all the time.
Don't tell the actor, because the actor's going to think, And then maybe, too, something to think about as well. Do you need all that dialogue? If it's that dialogue heavy? For your first instinct is to say, of course, I wrote this. I need all this dialogue. But, as you said, Benicio said...
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Do you really need all the dialogue, or can you do it, without so much?
And if you get in trouble, if you go over someone onto someone else, at least you have that person in the foreground telling you where you're at, in a way. So if you have a couple of shots like that, you can get out of eyeline problems.
What's a lesson that you learned in documentary that helped you transition into narrative features?
I think it's all, I don't think there's sort of a single lesson. It's all like a learning curve, isn't it? I mean, it's like you're kind of like, I don't know if it's learning. You're just finding a way you feel you want to put yourself in respect to what's in front of you, what's happening in front of you, and you get sort of an instinct for how something is developing. So I think what I took from documentaries is like, again, if I'm watching a rehearsal with a director in the morning with the actors, it's funny how often I'll kind of go around to find some sort of viewpoint, and the director will kind of like follow me as though that's the best position or something to view the scene from, you know. But I think that's the connection between documentary for me and feature work. But also the idea of, I mean, in terms of lighting, it's this sort of minimalist approach. I mean, I'm quite a minimalist, I think, in terms of lighting. I mean, sometimes I use a lot of lights, but it's to do a very simple effect. And I think I take that from shooting documentaries where I didn't have any light and it was just me and a camera and that kind of thing.
Hi. So considering your minimalist approach, what is your attitude towards filtration? For example, I would be apprehensive to marry myself to the look of like a chromist, something to that effect. So how do you approach?
The last time I had a filter on a camera was a film that I shot in, would have been 1986, and I still regret it. I shot the whole film with a very, very light, I don't know if it was a black Promus, whatever it was back then, and I damn wish I could go back and take it off. And I haven't, I mean, I've used polar screens and things like that since, and NDs, but I've never put any diffusion on a lens since then. Oh, I lie. I did a couple of shots in Sid and Nancy where we were on a plane and we wanted to make it gauzy, and it was a really silly idea, but it was, I mean, it worked for what it was trying to be, but I don't use Promus, or I haven't used a fog filter even, no, not for years and years.
I guess a question as well. How long do we have today?
That's your question.
We've been chatting for a little while, and want to make sure you guys are okay.
Yeah.
You keep going? All right, we'll keep going then. I'll just keep circling the room. You guys have a lot of questions, so.
What are your thoughts on AI and its sort of role in
We talk a lot about that. We were having a lengthy conversation the other night with Greg Fraser and Tom Siegel. Right. And I think there's a lot of quite worried cinematographers out there, yeah.
I think the DGA's deal just had a limited the use of AI. So I think it's a big concern in the business. And
it's interesting because we started working, on animated films. Like we were asked to work on WALL-E and just consult, and that sort of grew. We've been on quite a lot of animated films, and I always felt that the animation and live action was kind of joining together, and that's CG and everything. It's joining together, but I always thought that live action would have the prominent position in that relationship, but I think now it's going the other way with AI.
That's a good way of putting it.
I have a very black outlook on everything from society to climate change, but with AI in the film industry, I don't know. It's where is the personality behind it? Does it become, like, if you work on an animated film, there's hundreds of people, doing the animation and the lighting and setting the shot and the rendering and everything else, and it's coordinating all those people to work on towards the same goal like you do on a live action film. I wonder how that's going to work with AI when basically you could have a camera capturing this conversation for 2 hours. You could take it back into a computer. You can then find the shot for each particular moment and relight it any way you want. Who's doing that? I don't understand how that's going to happen. Is it going to be the computer technicians? Or is it going to be gamers? Is it going to be live action cinematographers? I'm not sure it is. You see, I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting next 5 or 10 years.
So I remember seeing 1917 for the first time with a friend, and we walked away with it with 2 very different takes. And this kind of gets back to something you mentioned when we were talking about 1917. And my take was that I loved the film and felt that the continuous take added to the tension. And his was, he liked the film, but he felt that it was more or less a gimmick. And I'm actually meeting him after this, and I'm going to tell him maybe what your own take is on the deeper reasoning behind choosing to shoot 1917 as a continuous take.
Well, I mean, it was Sam's idea.
It's Sam's fault.
Yeah, no, it's not my fault.
And it's not a gimmick.
No, it was on the top of the script, and we thought, well, really, is it a gimmick? And
I actually thought, no way, he's not going to do that.
No, we didn't think he was going to do it. But then he did say, when we started talking about it, he said, well, if we feel it's not going to work, then we'll do it in cuts. And we just say we designed the shot and worked through the locations that we could make it work in, and I don't know, it just felt right. I mean, it's a very particular story that takes place in real time, so kind of why not? I don't think in the end I felt it compromised anything. But I quite accept that some people see it as a gimmick. But we've also talked to people that have seen the film and said, oh, I didn't realize it was a single shot. So there's the whole gamut of people that watch it, and sometimes it's what you bring to it beforehand, that clouds your judgment of the film. I know I'm terrible like that. I don't like certain action films, so I hate them before I go in the door. I mean, it is. It's just a fact of life. And maybe your friend will watch it again in 10 years' time and have a different opinion. But I quite see how it can be seen as a gimmick. I mean, in a certain sense, it is a gimmick.
But because it was following the 2 guys and then 1 guy and just following them, I think it worked better. It was less gimmicky than another single shot that's just doing it to be a single shot. And so, swish pans up to the roof and then comes back down so you know where the cut is.
I think there's, certain directors, there's certain techniques you use holding a shot that doesn't allow an audience to have any relief. I mean, that worked wonderfully in that first TV series of Das Boot, not the last one, but the original German.
German one, yeah.
And Tarkovsky does it, obviously, brilliantly. The length you hold a shot, the shot becomes something else. The audience is almost trapped within that shot, and they have to think more about their relationship to it. That's my opinion. And when you cut, you come out wide on a cut. Suddenly, oh, that's a breath of fresh air. If that person is sort of struggling in a certain, going down the trench, and you kind of relentlessly with this character in this one situation, you suddenly cut out wide and you see the landscape or whatever. It's like relief. You can get out of it, the viewer. I think that's where, sure it doesn't work for everybody, but I think for some people, I think that really works.
Great.
My question is kind of similar to what's your first job? Because you said you started like doing low budget and then also doing student film indie films, and now you're doing those years in camera. So what's the jump that make you transfer from doing low budget indie films to your first big budget large film?
It was just really a slow transition. As I said earlier, I never expected I never expected to shoot dramas. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved movies, but I never imagined I'd be part of filmmaking. Documentaries I saw as a possibility, but it was only because, for me, it was being at film school. I mean, I shot like 15 films at film school. I shot my own documentaries start, and then other students seen what I'd done in my own documentary, and they asked me to shoot their films, and I ended up shooting a lot of drama. And, just that just gave me the confidence, I think, when I went out looking for work. But I mean, I did music videos and documentaries mainly for probably 6 or 7 years before I got a TV series I shot, and then on the basis of that, a fellow student at the film school that I actually didn't know while we were at film school, but he had seen that TV series and we had worked on documentaries together. Then he asked me to do his first feature film, and then that was successful. So then he asked me to do 1984, which was his second feature film. And then suddenly, I've told this story a lot, suddenly I'm sitting one day in a parking lot overlooking Salisbury Plain where we're shooting about 1984, and I'm sitting with John Hurt and Richard Burton, and I suddenly realized, my God, I found where I want to be,
It only took John Hurt and Richard Burton to make you realize that.
Bart, you had a question? Yeah, we're sort of at this inflection point in cinema. Both technology and, shall we say, taste in terms of market universe are changing. We have AI as a possibility and all these things. Where do you think the future of cinema is? Are you hopeful or are you worried? Because there's this world of stories that we care deeply about, and I'm slightly concerned that for somebody who's immersed in that, is there anything you're hopeful about?
Yeah, I think maybe the techniques will change, but I think the storytelling is still the same. I think people still want to tell stories, whether they use AI or whatever. I think in the end, there's going to be a human being behind that story and that telling of it. There might not be a cinematographer in the way we recognize a cinematographer, but that's fine.
At the same time, though, when in doing the podcast, we talk to directors like Sarah Polley and Ryan Coogler and people that want to tell a story, and that, I mean, it seems kind of dark some days, but then when you talk to people like that, you realize, yeah, these are people that want to make the kind of movies that we want to work on. So there are people out there that have enough standing that, so there'll be some of these movies out there. I don't know how many, but...
Well, yeah, but isn't it phases?
That's a whole nother question.
I mean, isn't it sort of phases? I mean, the classic Hollywood, musicals of the 30s and 40s, and then, suddenly, not suddenly, but then later, film noir, and then you get the wonderful films of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now that's tailed off, and we've got Marvel movies and superhero movies, but they're not really solving anything. So maybe we'll go back to a bit more thoughtful, thinking on films and storytelling. I don't know. The world changes, doesn't it?
There has been a rise apparently in documentaries because the streaming platforms are asking for it. But it's interesting because when a studio asks for a documentary, they want a cutoff date, which doesn't really work with documentaries because sometimes you're finding the story and you don't know, so you don't know when you're going to be finished. And then they want it in episodes, and then that sort of goes against the concept of a documentary. But I think it's hopeful in that people want to see documentaries, so that's a good thing.
Well, so
I'm
I
trying
think
to be
some
hopeful.
of the streaming series, I think maybe it's a different way of being entertained and being stimulated. Some of the series on streaming services are quite good, aren't they? And they can actually delve into characters in a more deep way than you can in a 90-minute, or nowadays it's 3.5-hour movie that you usually go and see. But But even then, you can go further with a series. I'm not saying that there's that many that are great, but there are some, and maybe that will develop. But I think just people are gonna, they're gonna watch movies in different ways, and they're gonna get their entertainment and stimulation in different ways. So, yeah, we can be nostalgic for, Dr. Strangelove and films like that. I certainly am, but I mean, times change.
But I think also one of the problems is nowadays that I was reading some reviews, and there are actually some interesting little movies out there, but I don't know how to find them. And I can't seem to find anything on Netflix. It's just, I don't understand their organization. And so that's the worst, is there could be interesting little movies there that people might see and go, oh, yeah, little movies aren't so bad, but they're not going to find them.
Well, we're going to do one more question from the audience, and then that made me think of another question. Thinking you can't find things, and Roger was talking about great films that or TV series that he likes. Makes me think of the old Blockbuster. You would go in and be like, James's picks of the week and Roger's picks of the week. What would be your picks of the week for a series that you mentioned, or maybe a little film that you've seen? Not to put you on the spot, but you said there are some great series out there right now, so just curious.
I was trying to be positive.
Well,
although there's a couple of Finnish series. There's one called Borderland that I think is pretty wonderful.
We watch a lot of Nordic noir.
Yeah, Nordic
because
noir.
they really do shoot them well. It's kind of interesting.
Nordic noir, okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. All right, one more from the audience. Oh, I don't know. I almost feel like who hasn't asked anything? Too many questions still. Too many hands. We're gonna go right here. Okay, go ahead.
What's the process? How is it different when you're lighting and blocking for an IMAX film as opposed to shooting 35 or with an XLLT? And how heavy is that thing on your
I don't know. I've never used one. No, when it's been IMAX, it's been they've opened up the
Conversion,
frame conversion. Yeah, we had to do a new transfer. DCP for the IMAX version, but I've never shot with an IMAX camera. Should I ask Hoyt, because he runs around with it on his shoulder, and I go, really? He's a big guy, but even so.
All right, well, that's all we have time for today, so big round of applause for James Roger Deakins.